Would you believe me if I told you there was something worse about Washington, D.C. than the Wizards? Welcome to part 34 of the United States might as well be 50 third world countries stacked up in a trench coat. D.C. is unique. It isn't a city or state, but just like most U.S. states, the lack of universal health care gets us to outcomes comparable to a developing nation. For example, our nation's capital has an infant mortality rate identical to Uruguay's. It's right around 5 per 1,000. There are over 70 developing or non-developing nations worldwide that have a lower maternal mortality rate than Washington, D.C. Their estimated 36 per 100,000 births is worse than Cuba, Jordan, Malaysia, Uruguay, and Uzbekistan. And with a literacy rate, happens to be worse than Honduras, El Salvador, Peru, Panama, Libya, and Vietnam. Median household income in D.C. is $108,000. But it's estimated that you need $108K as one person and $300K to live comfortably as a family of 4. Just under 50% of DC households make less than the $100K you need to be one person. 75% make less than the $200K, which is $100K away from what they think you need as a family of 4. The other 25% is probably the actual government and the industries that surround it. So you got to think about like the politicians, but also think about the lobbyists, think about the lawyers, think about the consultants. You would probably be doing leaps and bounds better being born at the median income in a lot of developing nations based on how that economy is skewed in the favor of the top 25% of DC households. So think Malaysia, Serbia, Costa Rica, just to name a few. If we're going to compare DC to developing nations, all of those could have made good examples. But when I asked myself why it was like this and I looked into it, I learned that DC and Estonia share a really similar history. If you don't know, Estonia has been a country for maybe 34 years, and they've been a developed nation for half of that time. Prior to that, they spent decades being absorbed into the Soviet Union. Since claiming independence, they took that new autonomy and made Estonia better off for Estonians. What does this have to do with DC? DC actually had a governor and a level of representation similar to a state's at a point. Just 2 years after slavery was made illegal in the United States, black men gained the right to vote and began participating in the system. This led to DC earning its own kind of federal representation, where black men actually held seats in the government of DC's pseudo kind of state setup. Congress, realizing that they gave a majority black area power akin to statehood, straight up revoked the power of the local government and gave it back to Congress. But that was almost 200 years ago. Is it possible that the federal government of one of the most developed nations on the planet is still preventing the black community from organizing and making real change to benefit themselves? Yes. Since then, Congress has had a history of stopping progress for the average DC resident, mainly because for the longest time, your average DC resident was black. Today, DC is a majority minority city. Local issues are handled by DC's city council, but Congress still has the final say. Fun fact, DC has one of the highest incarceration rates in America with over 800 incarcerated people per 100,000. The city of DC is 44% black. The jails in DC are 89% black. DC is 37% white, but the jails in DC are 5% white. When DC tried to fix its criminal code that unfairly targets the people of color in that community, guess who stopped it? Congress. Imagine what it would be if the average DC resident had voting power like the average Maryland or Virginia resident. Estonia's got some of the strongest health outcomes, some of the strongest education outcomes on that side of the planet. And they did it in a short amount of time as soon as they got that autonomy. Put your city or state in the comments if you want me to do yours next. We are covering all 50 states with this series. Shoot me a follow if you want to see when I do yours.